I am a proud progressive feminist, queer, Latinx, agnostic, millennial Democrat serving in the legislature. Right?
Good Saturday to you all. I've been here since Tuesday, and I've been really thrilled with how things have been going. Let me introduce our guests, but first I want to thank Ron Millar for getting us connected to State Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith, I said senator, didn't I? I'm promoting you. I'm promoting you already. Governor Carlos Guillermo Smith. I'd like to also introduce his fiancée, Jarek Mediavilla. Jarek, thank you for coming today. State Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith is a proven fighter for Florida's working families and students. He was elected in 2016 and then re-elected in 2018 for House District 49, which is the East Orlando and parts of Orange County, in the Florida House of Representatives. Representative Smith co-founded and was elected chairman of the Legislative Progressive Caucus. He has delivered millions of dollars in state funding to PTSD programs for veterans, first responders, and mass shooting survivors in his district. He has used his voice to champion civil rights, cannabis reform, gun safety, debt-free college, mental health, and animal welfare. Representative Smith also made history with his election, becoming Florida's first openly LGBTQ Latinx state lawmaker. He's donated his time for us today in a very busy schedule, so please give a round warm of applause to State Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith.
Thank you, Hugh. Good morning, American Ethical Union. How are you? It's great to be here with like-minded humans, really, to discuss our shared goal of living in a world that is democratic, that is compassionate, that is ethical, just, and sustainable. I want to thank you all for the work that you do every single day as well to advance the goal. I think that we all have a role to play towards that shared goal and the shared mission. And of course, what I see my role as, at least for the time being, is to carry that torch as an elected leader in the state legislature. So this is my third year in the Florida House of Representatives. I managed a Men's Warehouse store for 8 years before I got involved in politics. And when then Senator Obama was elected to the White House, I got really energized and motivated to become a part of the political process to try to help him advance his progressive policy agenda, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. So I got some really good advice from folks who know more about this than I do, and they said, well, just volunteer for everything. Just be a community agitator and an activist. And so I took that advice literally, and I decided that I would just start volunteering my time whenever that was, whether it was on a weeknight making calls for the candidate of my choice or the organization of my choice, or tabling for Equality Florida on the weekend. Equality Florida is our statewide LGBT civil rights organization here in the Sunshine State. And eventually I became a staffer on the Hill in Tallahassee in our state capital. And in that year, in 2015, the year I decided to run for office, there was a transgender bathroom bill that was moving through the process that made it a crime for a transgender person in our state to use a public restroom that matched their gender identity. We killed the bill, thank God. But in that process, I was so frustrated with certainly the majority party that brought the legislation forward, but even with members of my own party. They were voting the right way, but they didn't seem to be authentic advocates for the issues. They didn't understand the issues. They weren't saying the right things. They weren't asking the right questions. And that was kind of when a light bulb went on in my head, and I said, you know what? I could probably do this job better than all these people. Right? So that was when I decided to run for office, and I was elected in 2016. I'm a proud out gay man who's addressing you during Pride Month here in Florida. I'm here with my fiance, Jarek. Again, a shameless plug. We're recently engaged. We're getting married on Labor Day, which is super exciting, of course. But just 10 days ago was exactly 3 years since the terrible tragedy at Pulse nightclub, where 49 mostly LGBTQ people of color were murdered by an American homophobe with an assault weapon. A generation of queer youth in Central Florida was stolen from us in a matter of seconds. So imagine my reaction when I hear through news reports and through leaked audio tapes last month that one of my Republican House colleagues who I serve with was asked by a constituent at a town hall where he represents his district in Pensacola whether he would introduce a bill based on the alleged Bible verse that was characterized as a man who has an affair with another man will be put to death. And what was my elected colleague's response to that question at a town hall? He responded by laughing out loud, reminding the constituent that such a passage also exists in the Old Testament, and basically said, well, I wonder how legislation like that would go over. And he just laughed it off and didn't call it out and almost agreed with the suggestion. So therein lies another great reason, one of many reasons, for why we have to preserve secular ethical government. It's also in order to protect ourselves and our freedoms from extreme religious ideologies, regardless of whether those ideologies represent the majority or not. This is a trend, and we've also seen numerous religious freedom restoration acts across the country. You may have one in your state. It's called the RFRA. This is one of the reasons why pro-equality and pro-choice coalitions, we have to work together to stop our political opponents from rolling back progress. But I think there's almost no other idea in public policy or no other area of public policy where the blurring of the lines between church and state has become more insidious than in public education. So last year, and this has become the average for the last few years, Florida diverted $1 billion, billion with a B, from public schools into private, mostly religious, unregulated schools. Annually in Florida, we see $1 billion in tax revenue diverted to private schools through what I would call a voucher scheme that is deliberately constructed in a way to circumvent the constitutional restrictions on funding religious schools. According to a recent story, Howard, in the Orlando Sentinel, some private schools in Florida that rely on public funding teach students that dinosaurs and humans live together. Some of these private schools, they use these so-called history books, and when they describe the civil rights movement, they say that, quote, most black and white Southerners had long lived together in harmony, and that, quote, power-hungry individuals stirred up the people. This is their assessment of the 1960s, okay? It was reported last week, again, in my favorite publication, the Orlando Sentinel, that Merritt Island Christian School, which is out in Brevard County near Cocoa Beach, which, by the way, received just last year $700,000 worth of private school vouchers from their students, that they outlined in their student handbook that students who identify as being gay or students who identify as being transgender have committed a Class 1 infraction in the student handbook, which basically means what is the punishment for a Class 1 infraction at this school? Expulsion. Expulsion. Do these schools deserve taxpayer money? No, because they are essentially planting seeds of hate in the minds of students, and they should be altogether disqualified from receiving any sort of taxpayer dollars Period. End of discussion. So what do we do as I think, secular and humanist leaders to push back on these non-secular agendas that are creeping into city government, state government, the federal government? I think we have to keep organizing. I think what we have to do is we have to keep holding elected officials of both major parties accountable. And we have to be out and authentic about who we are as well. Whether it's no religious affiliation, or we're humanist, or we're agnostic, or we're atheist. I mean, as Harvey Milk said, come out wherever you are.